This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
So the Browns have 26 free agents this offseason, and that number sounds super daunting when you first hear it, but when you put it into context, it's not. And the reason they have 26 free agents is because they have a bunch of people that they had to sign when their starters went down to kind of hold in spots on the roster. So while that number sounds crazy, it's really not that crazy. And what I want to focus on is the guys that I think could be back for the Cleveland Browns in 2024 that are free agents. The first guy I'm going to start with, and I'm going to split these guys into two piles, actually. I'm going to split them into piles of definitely going to be back, in my opinion. I think they have a very strong chance to be back. Doesn't guarantee that they are, but I do think that there's a good chance that they are back. Then there's the second pile of players where I'm like, wouldn't be surprised, but I wouldn't expect them to be back. So first pile, the guys I think will be back for sure. Now I kind of went over this list in the video on Sunday, so I'll kind of go over the list again, but the Browns have 26 players available for free agency. Of those players, the ones of note are Za'Darius Smith, Sione Takitaki, Anthony Walker, Shelby Harris, Jordan Elliott, Maurice Hurst, Corey Bojorquez, Rodney McLeod, Kareem Hunt, and Joe Flacco. Now, I think, me personally, of those players, Sione Takitaki is like the closest to a lock to come back. He's not going to be too expensive, and he plays a pivotal role for this Browns team. He's somebody who holds it down sometimes at Mike linebacker. I don't think they're going to bring back Anthony Walker, but he holds it down at Mike linebacker. He's a really good run defender, a really good utility linebacker, and somebody that you just want in that room, especially when you have a JOK out there who's more of a free roam playmaker. I think having somebody like Takitaki who kind of goes where he's supposed to is important, and I think him and JOK, that's going to be an important linebacker tandem for this team going forward. So I do think Sione Takitaki is definitely one of those guys that they keep on this team going forward. Now, I don't think the deal is going to be big. It'll probably be a 1 or 2 year deal for not that much money. And as long as they can keep that money at that point, which I expected they should for Takitaki, then they'll be able to retain Sione Takitaki. Next player, again, along the same lines, Maurice Hurst. I think they're going to bring him back on a 1 year deal, similar to what they brought him in on. He was on like a 1 year kind of prove it deal. He'll be on a 1 year kind of prove it deal with a little bit more money. I think they're going to want that veteran presence and the ability that Maurice Hurst was giving you on that interior to not only rush the passer, but also stop the run. He was very good when he was out there. I think they'll go and grab Maurice Hurst again and give him another 1 year deal. And I think Maurice Hurst would be fine with that because I think he found himself a good fit here in Cleveland. I mean, I think they'll keep one of two players. They're going to either keep Jordan Elliott or they're going to keep Shelby Harris. Now, I think they're probably going to lean towards keeping their drafted player in Jordan Elliott, but I don't think they bring back both. I would be surprised if they brought back both. I think they're going to keep maybe Jordan Elliott or Shelby, and I'm probably leaning towards them betting on Jordan Elliott and then maybe drafting somebody as well and hoping Siaki Ika steps up to later on in his development. So that's the defensive players. I don't think anybody who's available on offense is a sure hit to come back. And then Corey Bojorquez is also another player that I'm pretty sure, I'm almost 100% sure they're going to re-sign Corey Bojorquez to this team to be the punter again. Wouldn't be surprised at all if they did that. He was really good for the team. He didn't have a great playoff game, but he was really solid for most of the year. And I think they'll bring him back as well. Then we get to the more interesting pile of guys, and that's the maybe guys. The first guy on the maybe pile is Nick Harris. because while I think Nick Harris carved out a nice role for himself at fullback, I don't know if that role goes any further than, hey, we're short people and we need somebody to fill a role, and Nick Harris, can you play fullback? Like, I don't know if it goes any further than that. Like, I don't know if they're going into next season thinking, hey, we should really keep Nick Harris as a fullback. I'm not sure where they feel about that. If they saw him as kind of a we did this because we had to kind of role, or we did this because we had to, but now we want to after being in that position. So not 100% sure what they're feeling on Nick Harris. So that's why I'm not 100% sure that they'll bring him back. Za'Darius Smith is interesting because he is at the age now to where he's not going to be that expensive. Like, you're probably talking about $9 to $10 million to bring him back from next year. And I think the Browns would want to give it another go. I think Za'Darius Smith would want to give it another go. It's a question of, is there anybody in the free agency market right now that's willing to overpay for Za'Darius Smith after a down year? That's going to be a question that has to be asked. I don't think that there's going to be anybody who's going to be willing to overpay him. So I think the price for Za'Darius Smith is going to stay reasonable. And I think if you're the Browns and the price is reasonable on Za'Darius, I think you're willing to bet that he bounces back from a low sack total season, but overall production, he was fine. And I think you just kind of expect him to bounce back and have a good year after that. And I would bet on it. So that's why I think Za'Darius could come back. This is another player that I think made the conversation about him super interesting, and that's Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt, the conversation around Kareem Hunt, whether the Browns will bring him back or not, went from non-existent in July to, hey, you kind of led this team in touchdowns. So we got to consider it at the very least. Now, Kareem Hunt has proven himself to be a very, very good short yardage option. And the big problem that we've forgotten because we haven't watched Nick Chubb run in a while is that Nick Chubb, while he is one of the best running backs in the NFL, if not the best running back in the NFL, sometimes can be a bit deficient in that short yardage area. Like, he's just never as good as you want him to be. Kareem Hunt was always good in that. And part of me thinks, hey, if you're not in love with Jerome Ford, if you're not in love with Pierre Strong, and you're probably going to draft somebody next year, why not bring back Kareem Hunt as long as the money's reasonable? Now, part of the reason the Browns parted ways with Kareem Hunt in years past has had to do with some uneasy relationship dynamic that he has with the front office for whatever reason. Like, they always seem to acknowledge that there was a problem with him in the front office without acknowledging it. Like, every time that he comes back, he has to answer questions about how he feels about the organization as a whole and all of that. And then they ask him about the city of Cleveland. So I have no clue how he feels about coming back, but I do know that they would like to bring him back probably, and that would be a nice accent to have with Nick Chubb. And with this Browns team looking like a team that's going to be trying to win it all next year, you probably don't want to be betting on a rookie for short yardage or a Nick Chubb post-knee surgery. You probably want somebody like Kareem Hunt in there for short yardage. I would think that the Browns would go the free agency route, or maybe they do trust Jerome Ford, or maybe they draft somebody. Like, I don't think Kareem Hunt's going to be the number 2 back. I think he's going to specifically be a short yardage back for this team, and maybe a screen every once in a while guy in there. But they're going to try to get an upgrade at that backup running back position as well. I wouldn't be surprised there because, again, you got to expect that Nick Chubb is not going to come out guns blazing early in the season coming off of a serious knee surgery. If he returns to form, that would probably be later in the season. So you're going to want a strong backup. And Kareem Hunt's not the guy you want backing up Nick Chubb anymore, but he might be the guy that you want to bring in kind of as a fullback on some low-key type stuff where it's like, hey, he comes in for a short yardage package, or he comes in goal line, kind of like Jerome Bettis, like kind of on that type vibe with him. So the conversation around Kareem Hunt is very interesting. The last guy I have here in the maybe category is Joe Flacco. Now, this depends on so many things, right? Joe Flacco is now 39 years old. So on one hand, if you're Joe Flacco, you wonder if you want to play still. I know he said he wanted to play for multiple years during the regular season when everything was going well. We'll see how he feels in the offseason right now. Like if he still wants to play. I'm not 100% sure if that's going to be the case. And the reason I'm not sure is the reason I wouldn't be sure about anybody at 39 years old returning every year. Like 39 is really old to play NFL football, and it's not a guarantee that somebody plus 37 years old continues to play no matter what position that they play. So you got to wonder if he's still going to continue to play, if he's going to retire, whatever it's going to be. You want to wonder that with Joe Flacco. Also, like, what opportunities is Joe Flacco going to have? He's not going to have the opportunity to start here in Cleveland. It's going to be kind of an awkward spot for him because they're already committed to Deshaun Watson. And if you're the Browns, it is worthwhile that you see out this Deshaun Watson commitment because we know that the ceiling with the team with Deshaun Watson is much higher than it would be even if you brought Joe Flacco. We saw what the team could do and what the limitations of the Cleveland Browns are with Joe Flacco in like 6 weeks this year. Like we saw it all condensed into a package. We know, okay, we might be able to get to the playoffs and we might be able to string something up, but when it comes to the playoffs, it starts to matter, right? So you're still going to have to commit to Deshaun Watson. He's going to be the starter. He has to ask himself, does he want to continue to be a backup? Does he want to go somewhere where he can compete maybe to be the starter? Or does he want to just call it a day, right? Because it's easy to want to play again when you are starting and everything. But if you're not starting, if you're not in that position, then it becomes kind of okay, well, I don't know, right? And we'll see with Joe Flacco where he's at. We also have to see where the Browns are at, right? Because with Deshaun, you have to with any starting quarterback, and you'll see this with every team, you have to have some thought about who the backup is because you don't want to give the impression to anybody that you do not believe in your starter. The reason you don't want to do this isn't to protect egos or anything. It's to make sure that the locker room understands who's in charge. Right. And quarterbacks have a very serious leadership role in the NFL locker room. So if there's any doubt about if a quarterback is in charge, that can be something that affects the dynamic of the locker room, right? When the locker room starts to get split between one quarterback and the other, we've seen this here in Cleveland. We saw this in the Baker Mayfield era. Things start to become really difficult to manage. So sometimes what's best for the team on paper might not be what's best for the team in practice. And they have to figure out, like, is that going to be what's best for the team? Like, are Joe Flacco and Deshaun Watson, do they work well enough together to where that won't be an issue? You got to figure out and do the calculus on that too before you decide to bring in Joe Flacco or to not bring in Joe Flacco or to not consider it or to consider it. And also Joe has to consider whether he wants to come back here in a situation where he's not going to start versus going somewhere where he can compete. So that's why he is in the maybe category. And if Joe makes that decision on, like, he does want to go through this and he's fine with being the backup, then I do think that the Browns would be fine with keeping him as a backup, because while you're trying to figure out this thing that you're doing with Deshaun Watson, you know that if anything goes wrong, you can switch back to that old thing pretty quickly with Joe Flacco. So it would provide the Browns a lot of flexibility. And with Deshaun having some questionable injury moments this year where it's like, hey, we don't know if that body's going to hold up going forward. Like, there's some serious concerns about that. You know, me personally, I think a lot of people are concerned about the fit with Deshaun Watson and Kevin Stefanski. I think that they're going to figure that out. They were on track to figure it out during the season. I wouldn't be surprised if they figured it out next year. That really wouldn't shock me. What does concern me seriously is Deshaun Watson's body going to hold up? Because what we saw this year was concerning. Like, he had injury after injury after injury, not even just the ones that took him out for a period of time. Because, yeah, he had the the bone bruise on his throwing shoulder, which was a freak injury. And then he had the freak injury that took him out, which was the bone shattering on his throwing shoulder. Okay, those are all kind of like super improbable things. But then there was like, you know, the constant soreness, the constant high ankle sprains that he was getting, like all of those little knick-knack injuries. And it's like, hey, is he going to be able to stay healthy at this age with his play style, or is he going to be able to make that adjustment? So that being said, since I'm not really confident in his ability to stay healthy right now, like if you could bring Joe Flacco back, or maybe you can get your hands on a Jacoby Brissett or something like that, like I wouldn't be out of favor with a strong backup like a Jacoby or a Joe Flacco. Whereas in other years, I understood why they went the way they went with Josh Dobbs and DTR. Next year, I don't really think there's much room to play around, and you don't really have the most confidence that Deshaun Watson is going to stay healthy for a full 17 games. So since that's the case, if you can find one, find a strong backup. Now, if Jacoby's available over Joe Flacco, that's an interesting conversation to have because Joe is more accomplished. But I kind of would personally prefer Brissett because I know that those two can work together in a locker room dynamic where both players are active. And also, I think Brissett, since he's younger, like there's more possibilities with him, right? Going forward, he's not turning 39. And I do think that matters at some point. Like Joe Flacco's probably not going to play until he's 40 or 41 or something like that, where you can have Jacoby Brissett be the long-term backup behind Deshaun Watson, because he's starting to get into that age where he's not going to get shots to start anymore, but he is going to be able to stay in the league as a backup. And I think it would be worth the investment to spend $4 to $6 million on a backup like Jacoby Brissett or Joe Flacco. Like anybody else, though, I'm not spending that money on. But Joe Flacco, Jacoby Brissett, I would be fine with. But that's my thoughts on that. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.